For comics writer-artist Chris Ware, these are his single issues and this is his collected edition. Let me clarify. Rusty Brown is Chris Ware's third big comics novel following Jimmy Corrigan and Building Stories, both of which I've made videos for on this channel. It is a 250 plus page dust-jacketed tome published in 2019. But just like Jimmy Corrigan and Building Stories before it, significant portions of this book were previously published by Chris Ware in the pages of his Acme Novelty Library as separate vignettes and stories. Here, Chris Ware has been self-publishing stories set in the Rusty Brown world since 2005 in the slim, sometimes cloth-spined, sometimes cloth-bound, hardcover volumes, which makes Rusty Brown a work over 15 years in the making. So, to the question I ask in this video's title, is Rusty Brown, like Jimmy Corrigan, like Building Stories, another comics masterpiece from Chris Ware? For me, the answer is an unqualified yes. Yes, it is. This is a gorgeous but dense, immaculate but layered work, one that matches its ambitious and artistic vision of storytelling with an execution as precise, clear, and masterful as any I've seen in comics. In this video, we'll talk both about the collected edition of Rusty Brown as well as the issues of Acme Novelty Library that contained parts of it. There's a lot to talk about, so let's get started with our look at Rusty Brown. Rusty Brown, the novel, is distinctly divided into 4 sections, each of which deals with a character or characters whose lives intersect and overlap with those of the characters in the other sections. The first 3 of these 4 sections were originally published in the pages of Acme Novelty Library, namely number 16 from 2005 and number 17 from 2006, number 19 from 2008, and number 20 from 2010. The 4th section of this book is, I believe, published here for the first time. In many ways, the whole story of Rusty Brown takes place in a single day set in suburban Omaha, Nebraska in the mid-1970s. But these sections also collapse time inward and outward to show you the past and the future of the lives and experiences of these characters in some very unique and powerful ways. The first section introduces us to the title character of Rusty Brown, a bullied and slightly pathetic 9 or 10-year-old, a kid who fantasizes about having superpowers and has a fixation on Supergirl through both an action figure that he brings to school and that causes him great distress, as well as his fantasies in which he sees her naked. We glimpse Rusty's home and tormented school life through the first half of the day, and Chris Ware makes each mundane moment feel drawn out and painful, not by exaggerating the action or the language, but by making the isolation, alienation, and strangeness of this kid resonate through the spaces and silences of the pages. One of my favorite parts in this first section is how when Rusty is bullied by older boys in his school, the pain and cruelty is conveyed through a mitten. He drops his mitten when confronted, the boys pick it up, and one of his tormentors spits into it. We see a quick flashback to Rusty getting these gloves as a present from his grandmother. We come back to the red glove in different panels and continue to see an occasional drip from it as Rusty continues with his day. A day like every day where even taking his boots off is an effort. This is classic Chris Ware, turning architecture of layout into a song of pain. How can something so clean and so precise yet be so searing and raw? This is a question that I ask myself throughout reading this book. This first section also introduces us to various characters in Rusty's school, including not just the bullies but teachers as well, one of whom is an art teacher called Mr. C. Ware, who looks exactly like the author. Another is W.K. Brown, Rusty's father, who teaches at the same school. But significantly, the first section of the story is also the story of 2 new students at Rusty's school, a brother and a sister. Chalky White is a boy Rusty's age who joins Rusty's class and is assigned Rusty's desk and discovers his Supergirl figure. And his older sister is Alice White, who attends classes taught by Mr. Brown and Mr. Ware and is classmates with one of the boys who bully Rusty. Chalky and Alice's story starts and unfolds parallel to Rusty's morning and is first presented as a horizontal strip at the bottom of each page, where you realize that this is what Chalky and Alice are doing as Rusty's story is unfolding above. But soon they intersect with the panels above and below showing the same scene from different points of view, also giving us different speech that we hear from different angles. This is more than just a gimmick. It establishes immediately the multiple views and multiple experiences that Chris Ware is interested in capturing. Things are separate and distinct, but also unified and tied together, not just through the consistent art style and design, but also the recurring and repeated themes and motifs, like everyday cruelties, feelings of being adrift, escapism and fantasy, and the boundaries and limitations everyone has. The first section, dealing with Rusty, Chalky, Alice, the teachers, and others, was originally published in two parts. In 2005's Acme Novelty Library number 16 and in 2006's Acme Novelty Library number 17. It feels complete as a glimpse of everyday life that is as complicated and as individual as the snowflakes the pages start and end with, and about which there is a fair bit of commentary. The second section of Rusty Brown is mainly a science fiction story, a comics version of a short story published in the 1950s written by W.K. Brown, Rusty's father, who once dreamed of and embarked upon being a writer. The sci-fi story is about a Mars colonization effort that has an end I don't want to spoil. And the story within a story echoes with the same themes and ideas as the rest of the book. In this second section, we also learn more about Mr. Brown, not really someone presented as sympathetic so far. And what we get to know of his past, how it affects how he feels on that school day we saw, gives us maybe a completely new view on him. He doesn't become more likable or heroic, but the new angle does give us a fuller view of him. This section was over 2 years in the making, being published in 2008 in Acme Novelty Library number 19. And just like every other part of this book, it's not hard to see why it took this long. The level of detail in the panels and pages is not necessarily about cramming more stuff in. Rather, there's a density of craft and design that just takes my breath away. Every panel, every page is immaculately designed and reflects the complex, watch-like precision of what to illustrate, what to linger on, what to show from another side. That makes this feel that this wasn't so much drawn or written as it was delicately assembled using fine mechanical instruments. This density of craft perhaps reaches its peak in the third section of this book that focuses on the complete life, literally from the moment of birth to the moment of death of Jordan/Jason Lint, the main bully we met in the first section. This part of the book is the most experimental, the most technically brazen and bold part of the entire book. When Lint is a baby, the world is represented as he experiences it in sight and sound, and the art style develops and reflects his aging. Lint is also the most unlikable character in the book, a book where nobody has been outright lovable, not even Chalky White, the most innocent character. But even though this section is about his life of entitlement and waste and casual cruelty, Chris Ware is still able to make us feel sad at how these things happen. This section is also the most complete feeling as a separate piece. Unlike the Acme Novelty Library issues we've seen so far, which felt like vignettes or snapshots as full as they were, Acme Novelty Library number 20, which contained all of Lint, felt like a novel in itself. Much of this is because you go birth to death, giving you a beginning and an end, but also because it feels that the broader scope of time gives you many vignettes in this section. And finally, the fourth section, the brand new part, tells the story of Joanna Cole, Rusty and Chalky's African-American teacher. Joanna Cole is the one person in this book a reader can be fully sympathetic towards, which works as a relief for us in many ways and ties everything together with a touch of hope. Her life, as represented here in snatches of experiences over the years, heavily saturated with racism and sexism, both overt and subtle, is given to us with the same clarity and dispassion that earlier chapters have used to show hopelessness, frustrations, and impotence. This clarity is also applied to showing us her spirit, her resilience, her generosity, and the sometimes strange ways she finds to cope with a life that may not be what she wanted it to be. Without this section, Rusty Brown would still have been a masterful and potent examination of human existence with all its banalities and humdrum nature, but it may not have had the heart that brings it all together. Because we like Joanna and because we have that consistency of truth-seeing that Ware brings to his work, we also increase a little bit of our understanding of the other characters in this story. This is not a happy book. I don't know if Chris Ware has ever written a happy book, but this is a joyful book. That's because the joy is not necessarily about joy in these people's lives. These lives are messy and sad and full of poor decisions and selfish behavior. But the fact that Chris Ware takes so much unquestionable effort, skill, and talent, putting together literally thousands of panels of shapes and words to show us brief moments and small actions, seems to say humanity is worth it. Seeing human lives and existence as beautiful in spite of the mess and the cruelty and the sadness is a joy. So when you tell the stories of everyday humans with the shadows on our everyday lives, it still deserves a beautiful swallow everything whole approach. Chris Ware spends years and years putting these perfect representations of imperfect lives onto pages for us. Like he has done before in Rusty Brown, he just blows me away by caring so much about things that we may otherwise overlook or judge, and then brings his awe-inspiring skill into showing us what that kind of caring can create. Quite honestly, it is staggering, and I know I'm not doing him justice here. I'll just leave you with this. You may not love Rusty Brown, although I certainly did. But if you pick up this book, I guarantee that you will find over the years, for the rest of your life, more and more to unpack in it every time you revisit it. Chris Ware took over 15 years to create this, and I'm quite sure that I can take 15 years to truly appreciate what he has done here. One interesting note, in earlier issues of Acme Novelty Library, before number 16 over here, there are a couple of short pieces showing Rusty and Chalky as adults. They are still collecting superhero figures and exchanging them and things like that, which is not part of this book. Now, it could be because I think in Monograph, Chris Ware mentioned that they started as caricatures that he grew to love or wanted to make a more serious work about. So those may be abandoned stories. But because at the very end of this book, we get intermission, it's quite possible that there are more Rusty Brown stories to come, and this is just a first volume. I really hope I don't have to wait another 15 years for the second volume, but I'm ready to do so if that's needed. If you're interested in more Chris Ware, check out our Comics of Chris Ware playlist on this channel. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I'd love to have your comments below. This has been For the Love of Comics. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you at the next video.